What you're about to hear is a story that started at 30,000 feet and ended with an entire corporation on its knees. It began with a simple human request, a cup of water for a sick child. But for Dr. Alana Jordan, a black mother flying with her son, that request was met with suspicion, hostility, and ultimately humiliation. She was publicly shamed and kicked off the flight. But what the flight crew and the airline Oceanic Air didn't know was who they had just thrown away. They were about to learn that their disruptive passenger held the fate of their company's future in the palm of her hand. This is the story of how a moment of prejudice triggered a catastrophic chain of events, and how karma came back with a vengeance that no one saw coming. The recycled air of the Oceanic Air Flight 723 cabin was already stale thick with the scent of disinfectant and the low hum of passenger anxiety. Dr. Alana Jordan settled into her seat 22B, a cramped economy space that felt even smaller with her 5-year-old son Orion nestled against her. Orion, usually a vibrant ball of energy, was quiet, his forehead warm against her arm. An ear infection had been brewing, and despite the children's Tylenol she'd given him, he was miserable. His whimper was a tiny, sharp sound that pricked at her heart. "My ear hurts, Mommy," he mumbled, his face flushed. "I know, sweet boy. Try to sip some water. It'll help them pop when we take off." Alana soothed, rummaging through her carry-on. Her water bottle was empty. She'd chugged the last of it while navigating the chaos of LAX security. A simple oversight, but one that would soon ignite a firestorm. Boarding was complete, the cabin doors sealed with a definitive thud. They were in the pre-takeoff limbo, a period Alana knew could last anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour. She needed water for Orion, and soon. She spotted a flight attendant near the galley, a woman in her late 40s with sharp features and blonde hair pulled back into a severe bun. Her name tag read Susan. Alana unbuckled her seatbelt. The sign was not yet illuminated, and took a few steps down the aisle. "Excuse me," Alana said, her voice soft but clear. "I'm so sorry to bother you before takeoff, but my son is feeling quite unwell. He has an earache, and I was wondering if I could possibly get a small cup of water for him to take his medicine." Susan turned, her expression one of practiced, impatient tolerance. She gave Alana a swift, dismissive up-and-down glance, her eyes lingering for a fraction of a second on Alana's simple jeans and hoodie. It was a look Alana, a black woman who had navigated countless predominantly white spaces, knew intimately. It was a look of assessment, of categorization. "Ma'am, we will begin our beverage service once we reach cruising altitude," Susan said, her voice clipped. "You'll need to return to your seat and fasten your seatbelt." "I understand completely," Alana replied, maintaining her polite tone. "It's just his ear is causing him a lot of pain, and swallowing can help. A small cup is all I need. I'd be so grateful." Susan's smile was a thin, brittle thing. "Everyone will be served at the same time. That is the policy. Please return to your seat." She turned her back, a clear dismissal. Alana felt a familiar prickle of frustration mixed with humiliation. She wasn't asking for a 3-course meal. She was a mother asking for a basic necessity for her sick child. She returned to her seat, her jaw tight. Orion was now crying softly, a heart-wrenching sound that made her feel powerless. Other passengers were noticing. A man in 22A gave her a sympathetic glance. A woman across the aisle rolled her eyes, clearly annoyed by the crying child. 10 minutes passed. The plane didn't move. Orion's cries grew louder. He was pulling at his ear, his face a mask of misery. Alana knew she had to try again. This time she pressed the call button above her head. A different flight attendant appeared, a young man named Kevin. He seemed less jaded than Susan. "Yes." "Hi," Alana began, again, her voice strained. "My son is in a lot of pain. I was told I have to wait for beverage service, but we've been sitting here a while and he really needs some water for his medicine. Is there anything at all you can do?" Before Kevin could answer, Susan materialized at his side. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her eyes fixed on Alana. The question was not one of concern, but of accusation. "No problem at all," Alana said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I was just asking your colleague for some water for my sick child." "Ma'am, you have already been instructed on the policy," Susan said, her voice rising slightly, drawing more attention. "You are creating a disruption. You were also out of your seat when you were told to be seated. I was unbuckled for less than a minute to ask for help." Alana countered her patience, wearing dangerously thin. "My son is crying. I'm trying to care for him. How is that disruptive?" "Your tone is becoming aggressive," Susan stated, crossing her arms. This was a classic tactic reframe, a plea for help as an act of aggression. "You are making other passengers uncomfortable. You need to control your child and remain seated." The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Aggressive. The word felt like a slap. She was a doctor, a pediatric cardiac surgeon, someone whose entire life was dedicated to saving children with a calm, steady hand. Yet here in this metal tube, she was being painted as an unruly, aggressive woman because she dared to advocate for her suffering child. "This is unbelievable," Alana whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. She looked at Orion, whose tear-streaked face was buried in her side. Her maternal instinct, a force more powerful than any professional decorum, took over. "I am not being aggressive," she said, her voice now firm, devoid of the pleading softness from before. "I am being a mother. I have asked politely twice for a cup of water. You are the one escalating this situation with baseless accusations and a complete lack of compassion." Susan's eyes narrowed. "That's it. I'm getting the captain." She spun on her heel and marched toward the cockpit. Kevin, the younger flight attendant, looked mortified, but stayed silent, a bystander to the unfolding disaster. The passenger in 22A, a middle-aged businessman named David Chen, finally spoke up. He leaned towards Alana and offered her an unopened bottle of Dasani. "Here," he whispered. "Please, take this." "Thank you," Alana mouthed, a wave of gratitude washing over her. But it was too late. A few moments later, Susan returned, and she was not alone. Behind her stood Captain Robert Miller, a man with a stern, authoritative presence. He didn't make eye contact with Alana. He addressed Susan. "What's the situation, Captain Miller?" Susan said, her voice laced with theatrical distress. This passenger, despite being told our safety protocols multiple times, has become increasingly disruptive and belligerent. She was out of her seat, refused to follow instructions, and her aggressive behavior is a concern for the safety and comfort of the other passengers and the crew. It was a masterclass in distortion, a complete fabrication built on a kernel of truth. Alana was stunned into silence for a moment, shocked by the audacity of the lies. Captain Miller finally turned his cold gaze on her. "Ma'am, my lead flight attendant has informed me of the situation. We have a zero-tolerance policy for disruptive behavior on oceanic air. I'm going to have to ask you to gather your belongings. You and your son will be deplaning." The words hit her like a physical blow. You're kicking me off the plane," she stammered. "For asking for water. My son is sick." "This woman is lying. I trust my crew, ma'am," the captain said, his voice final. "We will not be debating this. A gate agent will meet you. Please, let's not make this any more of a scene than it already is." Humiliation burned through her, hot and acidic. The eyes of every passenger were on her. Some looked away in discomfort, others stared with morbid curiosity. She saw judgment, annoyance, and in a few, a flicker of pity. But no one spoke up. Not David Chen, who had offered the water, not the woman across the aisle. Silence was their complicity. With trembling hands, Alana gathered her things. She bundled a now sobbing Orion into her arms, his small body shaking. As she walked down the aisle, the walk of shame, she could feel Susan's triumphant gaze on her back. She was no longer Dr. Alana Jordan, a respected surgeon. She was just another black woman being put in her place. As she stepped out of the aircraft and onto the jet bridge, the cold, impersonal voice of Captain Miller came over the cabin intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we do apologize for the slight delay. We had to remove a disruptive passenger for the safety and comfort of everyone on board. We should be on our way shortly." The door closed behind her, sealing her fate, and though no one knew it yet, the fate of oceanic air. The jet bridge felt like a tunnel to nowhere. Alana emerged back into the bustling terminal, feeling dazed and utterly humiliated. Orion had cried himself into an exhausted, hiccuping sleep on her shoulder. A gate agent, a young woman named Maria, met them with an apologetic but firm expression. "Ma'am, I've been instructed to escort you back to the main terminal. Your baggage will be removed from the flight and can be collected at the main baggage claim. I can help you try to rebook." Rebook. Alana's voice was hollow. "Your airline just publicly shamed me and threw me off a plane because your flight attendant has a problem with basic human decency. I understand your frustration, ma'am," Maria said, using the scripted, non-committal language of customer service. "The report from the captain states there was a safety concern. The report is a lie." Alana said, her voice dangerously quiet. She was too exhausted to shout, too emotionally battered to fight with another uniformed employee who was just following orders. The injustice of it all was a physical weight pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She followed Maria to the customer service desk, a sad beige counter of broken travel dreams. The line was long. Every minute that ticked by was a minute she wasn't on her way to San Francisco, a minute that felt increasingly precious. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. It buzzed again and again, with insistent, rapid-fire urgency. Annoyed, she pulled it out, expecting it to be a notification from the airline app, perhaps a final insult confirming her flight status as offloaded. But the screen read, "Dr. Peterson, SF Memorial Peds." A jolt went through her, sharp and electric, cutting through the fog of her humiliation. Dr. Peterson was the head of pediatric cardiothoracic surgery at San Francisco Memorial, her mentor, and the man who had arranged this entire trip. She was not flying to San Francisco for a vacation. She was flying there to perform one of the most complex and delicate heart surgeries of her career. She stepped out of the line, her heart suddenly pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "I have to take this," she mumbled, shifting Orion's weight. "Alana, thank God. Where are you? The flight tracker shows you've pushed back from the gate." Dr. Peterson's voice was tight with stress. "Mark, there was an incident." She began, her own voice trembling. "They kicked me off the flight." Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "They what? What are you talking about? Kicked you off?" "Why? It's insane." Orion was fussy. "I asked for some water and the flight attendant. She escalated the whole thing. Said I was being disruptive. They called the captain and removed me." She could hear the absurdity of her own words. It sounded like a story someone would make up. "Unbelievable," Dr. Peterson breathed, but his tone quickly shifted from shock to pure panic. "Alana, you don't understand. You have to get here. We had to move the surgery up. Move it up. Why?" It was scheduled for tomorrow morning. The patient is destabilizing Alana. Little Amelia Vance. Her pulmonary artery pressure is spiking. We can't wait. We've been trying to manage it, but she's not responding well. The team here, they're brilliant, but this is a Norwood-Sano procedure with a variant anatomy I've never seen. You have. You're the only one on the West Coast who has done this specific repair successfully. The world tilted on its axis. Alana leaned against a pillar for support, the noise of the airport fading into a dull roar. Amelia Vance. A 6-day-old infant born with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, a condition where the left side of the heart is critically underdeveloped. Alana had spent the last week studying the baby's charts, her complex heart imaging planning every single microscopic suture. She was the child's only real shot, and she was stuck in LAX, branded a disruptive passenger. Mark, I'm at the customer service desk now. I'm trying to get on another flight. What's the latest I can possibly get there? The OR is prepped and waiting. Alana, we wanted you scrubbed in by 3 p.m. at the absolute latest. It's almost 11 a.m. now. There isn't another commercial flight that will get you here in time. Not after you get your luggage and clear security again. Dr. Peterson's voice was raw with desperation. The family is here. They're falling apart. The family. The Vances. Her mind raced back to the initial consultation file. The name hadn't meant much to her then, just another anxious family entrusting her with their most precious gift. But a detail from the hospital's VIP intake form suddenly surfaced in her memory, a detail she'd skimmed over at the time. Patient's grandfather, Mr. Jonathan Vance, affiliation chairman and majority shareholder, Oceanic Air Global Holdings. Alana felt the air leave her lungs in a whoosh. It couldn't be. The cosmic irony was too cruel, too perfectly targeted. The airline whose employee had just dehumanized her, whose captain had blindly trusted a lie, was owned by the very man whose granddaughter's life now depended on her. Mark, she said, her voice dangerously calm. Listen to me very carefully. Who is the primary contact for the Vance family right now? The grandfather, Jonathan Vance. He's been coordinating everything. He's in the surgical waiting room right now. Why get him on the phone? Or better yet, get his personal assistant's number. Give him my cell number and tell him his airline Oceanic Air just kicked his granddaughter's surgeon off Flight 723. There was a stunned beat of silence. You're kidding me. I have never been more serious in my entire life, Mark. Do it. Now. She hung up the phone. The feeling of humiliation was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp-edged fury. The world had shrunk down to a single point of focus. It was no longer about her hurt feelings or public shaming. It was about a baby girl named Amelia, whose flickering flame of a life was being threatened by a toxic cocktail of corporate policy and personal prejudice. She looked down at Orion, now sleeping peacefully, his tear tracks dry on his cheeks. She thought of the flight attendant, Susan, likely settling in for her beverage service, feeling vindicated. She thought of Captain Miller, flying blithely onward, proud of his decisive action. They had no idea of the tsunami that was about to hit them. Alana looked at her phone, waiting. The tables were about to turn so violently it would shake the very foundations of their world. The ball was now in her court, and she was about to serve. Jonathan Vance was not a man accustomed to waiting. At 72, he commanded a global empire from a corner office that overlooked the San Francisco Bay. His voice moved markets. His decisions shaped industries. But today, he was just a grandfather sitting in the sterile beige purgatory of a surgical waiting room at SF Memorial, feeling utterly helpless. His granddaughter Amelia, a tiny being he had held only once, was fighting for her life in the NICU, and her survival hinged on a surgeon named Alana Jordan. He had vetted Dr. Jordan himself. He didn't just take the hospital's word for it. He'd had his team compile a dossier. Top of her class at Johns Hopkins, a fellowship in pediatric cardiothoracic surgery at the Cleveland Clinic, a trailblazer in single ventricle reconstruction. She was, by all accounts, a prodigy, a miracle worker with a scalpel. He had personally ensured that every possible resource was at her disposal. His phone vibrated. It was his executive assistant, Catherine, a woman whose unflappable demeanor was legendary within his company. But her voice was anything but calm. It was thin and reedy, laced with sheer terror. "Mr. Vance, sir, there's a situation, a major situation. Catherine, whatever it is, handle it. I'm at the hospital. Sir, it's about the hospital. It's about Dr. Jordan." Jonathan sat up straighter. "What about her? Is she all right? Has something happened, sir?" "She's not on the plane." The words didn't compute. "What do you mean she's not on the plane? I tracked the flight myself. OA723. It's in the air due to land in 40 minutes. "She's not on it, sir." Catherine repeated, her voice cracking. She was removed from the flight, before takeoff, in Los Angeles. Jonathan Vance felt a cold dread creep up his spine, a feeling he hadn't experienced since a hostile takeover attempt in the early 90s. Removed. By whom? For what reason? There was a pause, and he could hear the frantic clicking of a keyboard on her end. "Sir, the initial captain's report just posted to the internal system. It's—" "Oh my God. Spit it out, Catherine," he boomed, his voice echoing in the quiet room, startling a nurse walking by. "The report lists one passenger removed for being disruptive, aggressive, and non-compliant with crew safety instructions. The passenger's name is Dr. Elaine Jordan." For a full 10 seconds, Jonathan Vance was silent. He looked through the glass window at the doctors and nurses rushing by a ballet of life and death. His airline, the crown jewel of his life's work, a company whose logo was a symbol of service and excellence, had just kicked the one person on Earth who could save his granddaughter off a flight. And they had branded her aggressive and disruptive. The absurdity, the sheer catastrophic stupidity of it was breathtaking. "Get me the captain of that flight," Jonathan said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "Patch him through to the cockpit. I don't care what FAA regulations you have to break. Get me the head of in-flight operations. Get me the head of corporate communications. Get them all on a conference line in the next 5 minutes, and find out exactly where Dr. Jordan is right now." "Yes, sir." "And Catherine," he added, a sliver of ice in his tone, "find the name of the lead flight attendant on that crew. I want her entire service record on my desk before that plane touches the ground." He hung up and immediately dialed Dr. Peterson. "Tell me she's lying, Mark. Tell me this is some kind of horrible mistake." "It's not, Jonathan," Dr. Peterson confirmed, his voice grim. "I just spoke with Dr. Jordan. She's at LAX. She has her son with her. Apparently he was sick and she asked for a cup of water and it spiraled from there. They ejected her from the plane." Jonathan's fist clenched. "My company did this." "Your company did this," Dr. Peterson affirmed. "And Amelia's vitals are dropping. We don't have much more time to wait, Jonathan. You need to fix this." The word fix seemed inadequate. This was like trying to undetonate a bomb. He was a man who solved problems with money power and influence. He could move mountains, but could he bend time? His phone buzzed again. It was Catherine with Dr. Jordan's cell number. He took a deep breath, the kind he took before walking into a multi-billion-dollar negotiation, and dialed. She picked up on the first ring. "This is Dr. Jordan." Her voice was perfectly calm, devoid of any emotion. It was the voice of a surgeon, a voice of pure, cold control. It terrified him more than any screaming or crying would have. "Dr. Jordan?" This is Jonathan Vance. I have just been made aware of the incident on Flight 723. Mr. Vance, she replied, her tone still unnervingly placid. Your airline refers to it as the removal of a disruptive passenger. I believe your captain apologized to the other passengers for the inconvenience I caused. The polite, factual nature of her statement was a gut punch. He could hear the controlled rage simmering just beneath the surface. Dr. Jordan, Alana, I cannot express how. I have no words for the catastrophic failure on the part of my people. It is inexcusable. It is incomprehensible. It is, she agreed simply. My granddaughter Amelia. His voice broke, the titan of industry vanishing, replaced by a desperate grandfather. She needs you. Dr. Peterson says her condition is worsening. I'm aware, Alana said. I have her latest echocardiogram results forwarded to my phone. I saw the pressure gradient across the aortic arch. I know exactly what's happening inside her chest right now. The fact that she was still working, still analyzing even after what had happened, filled him with a profound sense of both awe and shame. What do you need? He asked, his voice raw. Anything. A private jet, a helicopter, a personal apology from every employee involved. I will fire them all right now. I will fly to you myself. Just tell me what you need to get here. There was a pause on the other end of the line. He could hear the faint sound of a child's sigh. What I need, Mr. Vance, Doctor, Jordan finally said, her voice losing its clinical detachment and taking on a diamond-hard edge, is for you to understand what happened today. This wasn't a simple customer service error. This was about a woman, a black woman who was immediately seen as a threat the moment she stopped being quiet and compliant. Your crew didn't see a mother trying to care for her sick child. They saw a problem to be eliminated. I understand, Doctor, and I swear to you I will tear my company apart to fix the culture that allowed this to happen. We can talk about fixing your company later. Mr. Vance, she said. Right now we have a baby to save. I am at the baggage claim at Terminal 7 at LAX. I have my son with me. You have 1 hour to get a private aircraft on the tarmac waiting for me. Not 2 hours. Not 1 hour and 5 minutes. 1 hour. Do you understand? Yes, he said without hesitation. Consider it done. Good, she said, because Amelia doesn't have a minute to spare. She hung up. Jonathan Vance stood in the waiting room, his phone still pressed to his ear. The panic was morphing into something else. A cold, focused rage. He had built Oceanic Air on a reputation of prestige and service. In the span of an hour, one flight crew had turned that reputation to dust, and in the process had nearly cost him the one thing in the world his money couldn't buy. He dialed Catherine back. Get the Gulfstream G650 out of the hangar at LAX. Fuel it. File a priority flight plan to SFO. I want a black car on the curb at Terminal 7 in 10 minutes to pick up Dr. Jordan. I want the head of LAX ground operations to personally meet her and escort her through a private security screening and onto that plane. No metal detectors, no lines, no questions. Do you understand? Yes, sir. And patch me through to Captain Miller on Flight 723. It's time he and I had a little chat. Up in the air somewhere over Central California, Captain Robert Miller was enjoying a cup of coffee, feeling satisfied with a job well done. He had handled a difficult situation with textbook efficiency. The cabin was quiet, the flight smooth. He was a man in control. He had no idea that his career was already over. He was just flying the ghost of a plane, a dead man walking in a uniform that no longer belonged to him. The real storm wasn't in the sky. It was on the ground, and it was about to make landfall. Flight 723 touched down at San Francisco International Airport with the gentle bump of a perfect landing. Captain Robert Miller felt the familiar quiet pride of a flight successfully completed. As they taxied to the gate, he made his final cheerful announcement, thanking the passengers for flying Oceanic Air. Inside the cabin, Susan was directing her junior flight attendants, Kevin and Maria, in their final duties. She wore an expression of smug satisfaction. She had removed a problem, enforced the rules, and maintained order. She envisioned the complimentary email she would write to Captain Miller, praising his decisive support. She was the picture of a loyal, by-the-book employee. When the jet bridge connected, the customary ding sounded. But instead of the usual stream of disembarking passengers, the first person to step through the door was a severe-looking man in a dark suit. He was flanked by 2 airport security officers. "Captain Miller, Susan Walsh," the man asked, his voice carrying an authority that brooked no argument. "I'm Daniel Porter, head of West Coast operations for Oceanic Air. We need you to come with us. Now." The passengers waiting to deplane began to murmur, sensing the unusual tension. "What is this about, Daniel?" Captain Miller asked, stepping out of the cockpit, his professional smile faltering. "This is not the place for a discussion," Porter said, his eyes like chips of flint. "Your crew will handle deplaning. You two with me." He gestured for Kevin and Maria, the other flight attendants, to remain. "You two will be interviewed separately." A cold knot of dread formed in Susan's stomach. This was not standard procedure. This was an ambush. She and Captain Miller exchanged a confused glance as they were escorted off their own plane down a private set of stairs to the tarmac, where a black SUV was waiting, its engine humming. It felt less like an escort and more like an arrest. The ride to the corporate offices was silent and terrifying. Susan's mind raced, replaying the incident with the black woman. What could have possibly warranted this level of response? The woman must have filed a complaint. An angry customer. Susan had dealt with them before. She'd just calmly state the facts of her report. The passenger was unruly. A threat. End of story. They were led not to a standard debriefing room, but to the main executive boardroom. It was a vast, intimidating space, dominated by a polished mahogany table that seemed a mile long. At the head of that table, projected onto a massive screen via a live video link, was the face of Jonathan Vance. He looked haggard, his eyes burning with an intensity that made Susan feel physically ill. "Captain Miller." Ms. Walsh Vance began, his voice a low, controlled rumble that vibrated with contained fury. "Do you have any idea what you have done today?" Captain Miller. Ever the confident leader spoke first. "Mr. Vance, sir, I'm not sure I understand. We had a disruptive passenger on Flight 723. We followed protocol and removed her to ensure the safety of the flight." Protocol. Vance's laugh was a harsh, bitter sound. "Let me tell you what you did. The disruptive passenger you removed is Dr. Alana Jordan. She is one of the top 3 pediatric cardiac surgeons on the planet, and she was on her way here to San Francisco to perform a life-saving operation on my 6-day-old granddaughter." The color drained from Captain Miller's face. He visibly swayed, gripping the back of a chair for support. Susan felt the floor drop out from beneath her. It couldn't be. It was an impossible coincidence. A nightmare. "Your protocol," Vance continued, spitting the word like poison left her stranded at LAX, while my granddaughter's heart was failing. "Your report, Captain, which I have right here, is a work of fiction. You claim she was aggressive. You claim she was a threat." The junior flight attendant Kevin tells a very different story under questioning. A story about a mother with a sick child begging for a cup of water. Susan found her voice a weak, reedy thing. She was becoming loud. She was questioning my authority in front of the passengers. Your authority! Vance roared, his image on the screen seeming to swell with rage. Your authority to deny a sick child a cup of water? Is that the authority you were so desperate to protect? You didn't see a mother in distress, Ms. Walsh. You saw a black woman you thought you could push around, and you used the rule book as your weapon. You didn't de-escalate. You escalated. You didn't solve a problem. You created a catastrophe. He turned his piercing gaze to the captain. And you are the captain of that vessel, the ultimate authority. And you didn't ask a single question. You didn't assess the situation. You took the word of a prejudiced, power-tripping employee and rubber-stamped her decision. You didn't lead. You enabled. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. The careers of the two people standing in that room were dissolving in real time. Mr. Vance, I had no idea. Captain Miller stammered. If I had known who she was. That is the entire problem. Vance yelled, slamming his hand on the desk in his hospital waiting room, the sound crashing through the boardroom speakers. It shouldn't matter who she is. Whether she was a world-renowned surgeon or a janitor, she was a human being, a mother with a child in pain. Our company's duty is to serve with dignity and respect. You failed on every conceivable level. You failed as employees. You failed as human beings. He paused, taking a ragged breath. His voice lowered, becoming deadly serious. As of this moment, you are both suspended without pay pending termination. You will be escorted from the premises. Your company credentials and access are revoked. You will not speak to the press. You will not post on social media. You will not discuss this with anyone. A team from our legal department will be in touch. Is that understood? Susan could only nod, tears of self-pity and terror streaming down her face. Her perfect record, her seniority, her pride all turned to ash. Captain Miller looked like a broken man, his decades of distinguished service undone by a single catastrophic lack of judgment. "Get them out of my sight," Vance commanded the silent executive Daniel Porter. As they were let out, Susan's mind fixated on one detail. The name Vance had mentioned. Dr. Alana Jordan, a surgeon. She had looked at a woman in a simple hoodie holding a crying child and had seen a threat. She had failed to see a doctor. She had failed to see an equal. The bias she would have sworn on her life she didn't possess was now staring back at her from the ruins of her life. Meanwhile, a sleek Gulfstream jet was descending rapidly toward San Francisco. Aboard Dr. Alana Jordan was not looking at the stunning view of the Golden Gate Bridge. She was on a satellite phone with the OR, her son, Orion, sleeping soundly on the plush leather seat beside her, a half-eaten gourmet cookie on the tray table. "Prep the cannulas for aortic and venous access," she instructed, her voice calm and authoritative. "I want a full heparin dose ready for injection the moment we establish bypass, and have the 7-eoproline sutures ready. We're going to need them for the anastomosis. I'm 10 minutes out." She had been humiliated, demeaned, and cast aside. But she was putting it all away, compartmentalizing it into a locked box in her mind. Right now, there was only Amelia. The reckoning could wait. The karma had begun its work, but the most important work was still ahead, in a sterile room under the bright lights of the operating theater, where she would hold a tiny, fragile heart in her hands. The transition from the hushed luxury of the Gulfstream G650 to the urgent antiseptic reality of the hospital was a dizzying plunge. The moment the jet's door opened on the private tarmac, Alana was no longer a passenger or a problem. She was a purpose. A hospital administrator, a man whose face was a mask of anxiety and deference, met her before her feet even touched the asphalt. "Dr. Jordan, this way. We have a direct route cleared for you," he said. His voice hushed, as if she were a visiting royal. They bypassed the public entrances, the waiting rooms, and the bustling main corridors. They moved through a series of sterile, restricted-access hallways where staff members instinctively flattened themselves against the walls to let her pass. The whispers followed in her wake. "That's her. That's Dr. Jordan." The contrast was a bitter pill. Hours ago, she was a nameless, faceless threat to be disposed of. Now she was a savior whose path must be cleared. She felt a grim irony in the fact that the same power structure that had cast her out was now bending over backward to welcome her in. She pushed the thought aside, locking it away in a mental vault. The rage, the humiliation, the searing injustice, they were heavy baggage she could not carry into surgery. With every step toward the operating wing, she consciously shed a layer of the morning's trauma, her focus narrowing until all that remained was the medical crisis ahead. Her destination was the surgical scrub room adjacent to OR3. The ritual was a sacred one, a physical and mental demarcation. She turned on the tap, and the rush of scalding water felt like a purification. As she worked the antiseptic soap into a thick lather, scrubbing from her fingertips to her elbows, with a practiced, methodical force, she felt the last vestiges of the shaken woman on the plane recede. The hands that had trembled with fury as she gathered her belongings were now the steady, skilled instruments of a surgeon, the tools that would cheat death. This was her armor. This was her sanctuary. When she pushed open the door to operating room 3, a palpable wave of relief washed over the assembled team. The low, tense chatter ceased. Every pair of eyes turned to her, the anesthesiologist, the perfusionist at the heart-lung machine, the nurses and her mentor, Dr. Mark Peterson. They saw not the victim of an airline's bigotry, but the commander who had finally arrived to lead the charge. In the center of the room, under the blinding glare of the surgical lights, was the reason she was here. Amelia Vance. A tiny, fragile form dwarfed by the machinery that sustained her, her chest barely rising and falling. The rhythmic beeping of the monitors was a fragile symphony playing the song of her struggle. Dr. Peterson met her gaze, his own exhaustion evident, but his eyes full of trust. He gave her a solemn, definitive nod. "She's all yours, Alana." For the next 6 hours and 27 minutes, the world outside OR3 ceased to exist. Jonathan Vance. Oceanic Air Flight 723. The searing memory of Susan Walsh's sneer, it all dissolved into an irrelevant fog. Alana's universe shrank to the size of a strawberry, the microscopic, beautiful, and tragically flawed landscape of a newborn's heart. Her voice, calm and clear, became the room's central rhythm. Scalpel, suction, 7 proline, please. Her hands moved with a fluid, hypnotic grace, a dance of profound knowledge and instinct. She was not just repairing a defect. She was an architect of life, reconstructing a miniature aorta, patching a ventricular wall that was as thin as parchment, and rerouting the very flow of existence through a heart that nature had designed to fail. The team around her worked as an extension of her will, anticipating her needs, responding to her quiet commands with flawless efficiency. At one point, 4 hours in an alarm blared a sudden, terrifying drop in blood pressure. A collective gasp, sharp and stifled, filled the air. But Alana didn't flinch. Her eyes remained fixed on the surgical field, her voice steady. "Increase the norepinephrine drip by 0.2 mics, and give me the forceps. The suture line is weeping slightly. We need to reinforce it." Without a flicker of panic, she located the microscopic leak and with sutures as fine as human hair sealed it. The alarms silenced. The pressure stabilized. The crisis had passed in less than a minute. In that moment, she was not just a surgeon. She was the absolute master of this small universe of life and death. Meanwhile, in the surgical waiting room, Jonathan Vance was living through his own form of hell. He had been stripped of all his power, his wealth, his influence, his command. They were useless trinkets in this sterile beige purgatory. He couldn't command a heart to heal. He couldn't buy a successful outcome. He was just a grandfather, helpless and terrified, staring at a clock on the wall whose hands seemed to be moving backward. The rage he'd felt earlier had burned out, leaving only the cold, heavy ash of fear. His entire global empire was worthless compared to the skill of the woman his company had so casually, so cruelly discarded. He had spent his life believing he was in control, but he understood now that it had all been an illusion. True control was in that room, in the steady hands of Dr. Alana Jordan. Finally, after an eternity that had aged him a decade, the doors to the waiting room opened. Dr. Peterson and Dr. Jordan walked in. They had removed their masks and surgical caps. Their faces were etched with profound exhaustion, their scrubs dotted with faint stains of battle, but their eyes held the unmistakable light of victory. Alana's gaze, steady and piercing, found him immediately. She didn't offer a gentle preamble or a comforting smile. She gave him the facts. The surgery was a success, she said, her voice tired but unwavering. The Norwood-Sano reconstruction is stable. She's in critical condition as expected, but the procedure went as well as we could have possibly hoped. The next 48 hours are crucial, but she has a fighting chance, a very good one. Jonathan Vance crumbled. The carefully constructed facade of the titan of industry shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. A raw, guttural sob escaped his throat, and he buried his face in his hands, his broad shoulders shaking with a relief so profound it was physically painful. He, a man who made world leaders wait, wept openly like a child. Alana watched him, her expression unreadable. She let him have his moment of catharsis, a necessary breaking down before the rebuilding could begin. When his sobs subsided into shuddering breaths, she spoke again, her tone shifting from the clinical report of a surgeon to the firm resolve of a woman who had been wronged. "Mr. Vance, when Amelia is stable and out of immediate danger, I'd like you to arrange a meeting, not with your lawyers or your PR team. With you and your entire board of directors." He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and full of awe. "Anything, doctor," he rasped, his voice thick with emotion. "Anything you ask." 2 days later, Amelia Vance's condition had improved even beyond their optimistic projections. And Dr. Alana Jordan, dressed not in scrubs, but in a sharply tailored black suit, stood once more in the main executive boardroom of Oceanic Air. The power dynamic in the room could not have been more different. The polished mahogany table was the same, but this time she was not the subject of a report. She was the one to whom everyone reported. Seated around the table were Jonathan Vance and the 7 other members of the board, a collection of men and women who controlled a combined net worth that could rival the GDP of a small nation. They looked at her with a somber deference born of fear-guilt, and the undeniable fact that she held the moral high ground and the life of their chairman's granddaughter in her debt. She began to speak, her voice as calm and precise as it had been in the operating room. She didn't raise it. She simply laid out the facts, one after another, like placing instruments on a surgical tray. She told them about Orion's earache, the simple request for water, the flight attendant's escalating hostility, the lies about her being aggressive, the captain's cold indifference, and the profound public humiliation of being escorted off the plane. She concluded with the detail that landed like a physical blow. My son, who is 5, asked me later, "Mommy, why was that mean lady so mad at you? Why wouldn't she give me water?" How do I explain the complexities of racial bias to a 5-year-old gentleman? The silence in the room was absolute, thick with shame. "I am not here for a settlement," she said, her gaze sweeping across their faces, daring any of them to misread her intentions. "Though I am sure your legal team has a very generous check prepared, hoping to make this all go away. Your money doesn't interest me. It cannot buy back my dignity or erase my son's confusion. And firing 2 employees is not a solution. It's a bandage on a cancer." She walked to the head of the table, placing her hands flat on the cool, polished wood. "You have a systemic disease in your company. It's called implicit bias. It's a corporate culture where an employee like Susan Walsh feels empowered to dehumanize a passenger based on her own prejudice, and a captain like Robert Miller sees no reason to question it. You train your staff on safety protocols and beverage service, but do you train them on how to see humanity? Do you train them to choose compassion over a rule book?" She looked directly at Jonathan Vance. "You kicked a black woman off your flight who happened to be a surgeon. The tragedy is that she was treated that way, not because you didn't know she was a surgeon, but precisely because she was a black woman. You saw what your biased culture has trained you to see. So here is my price." Alana continued, her voice resonating with an unshakable authority. "First, you will issue a public, unconditional apology. Not a vague corporate statement about falling short. You will name me, and you will state plainly that I was removed from Oceanic Air Flight 723 as a direct result of racial bias from your crew. You will own the truth in its entirety. Second, you will fund and establish a fully independent civilian oversight council for customer relations and employee conduct. It will not be run by airline executives. It will be headed by leading experts in civil rights, corporate ethics, and de-escalation. And third," she said, her voice dropping slightly, making the final demand even more powerful, "you will work with me and a team of DEI specialists I select to design and implement a new mandatory and ongoing training program for every single Oceanic Air employee from the tarmac crew to this boardroom. It will be a rigorous curriculum focused on empathy identifying and combating implicit bias and compassionate conflict resolution. And you will call it the Alana Jordan Initiative. Your company will not be allowed to forget. The terms hung in the air audacious and revolutionary. It wasn't a penalty. It was a prescription, a painful, expensive, and transformative cure." Jonathan Vance looked at the formidable woman before him. She had saved his family's future. And now, with these terms, she was offering him the only possible path to save the soul of his company. He rose slowly to his feet, his expression one of complete surrender and profound respect. He extended his hand across the table. "Dr. Jordan, on behalf of everyone here and everyone at Oceanic Air, we accept your terms, unconditionally, and thank you." Alana looked at his outstretched hand but did not take it. "Don't thank me, Mr. Vance," she said, her voice softening for the first and only time. "Do the work. That will be thanks enough." She turned her back straight and walked out of the boardroom, leaving a group of the world's most powerful people in a state of stunned, humbled silence. She had walked in holding them accountable for a single injustice. She walked out leaving them with a mountain of responsibility, their empire forever at the feet of the woman they had so carelessly tried to throw away. The story of Dr. Alana Jordan and Oceanic Air isn't just a shocking headline. It's a powerful lesson in the hidden biases that shape our world and the incredible force of character in the face of injustice. Alana could have taken the money and walked away. She could have sued them into oblivion. But instead she chose a harder, more meaningful path. She demanded not just punishment, but positive change. She used her unexpected leverage to force a multi-billion-dollar corporation to confront its own deep-seated problems, ensuring that what happened to her and her son would be less likely to happen to someone else. This story reminds us that dignity is not negotiable, and that true power isn't about your title or your bank account, but about your integrity. What would you have done in her situation? Have you ever witnessed a moment of injustice and wished you had spoken up? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe for more incredible real-life dramas where karma always delivers the final verdict. Thank you for listening.